Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. We have participants from Australia. Hello, Tony. From Africa, Asia, Europe, USA, North America, South America. So thank you very much for attending this webinar on tackling cyber threat and risk in aviation. I have the pleasure to moderate, facilitate this panel with three friends who will be with us today. So we have Eric Vautier, who is the Chief Information Security Officer of Groupe Aéroport de Paris. Nikki, unfortunately, felt sick this morning and she's voiceless, so she will be with us by thought. Joe Downsey, who is the Chief Security Officer of NAT, and also the Chair of the Aviation ISAC. Forgotten to say that Eric is also the chair of the ACI Europe Cybersecurity Committee. And Nuno Batista from TAP, who is the Chief Information Security Officer of TAP Portugal. So I will have the pleasure to help you to get the best of these three, I would say, leaders in cybersecurity in aviation. And you will see that not only they have to do it, but they are committed in supporting the aviation community. They are committed in providing a vision to the committee on how to address cyber in aviation. So just a few information about how to run the webinar. So you have a chat, which is there to let us know whether you have some technical issues. So if you have a problem of, I don't know, sound or whatever, please contact us via the chat. If you have some questions on the content, on the cybersecurity in aviation, please use the Q&A. And at the end of the discussion amongst us, we will take the time to pick some questions and to address and answer them live. So the first thing I would like now to start the panel is to give you an overview of the aviation cyber threat landscape. So I just remind you that this webinar is TLP clear, meaning that information are public. So there are some maybe information that we won't be able to disclose because this event is public. I just wanted to give you, I will say, some information of what we as EATM CERT in the EUROCONTROL European Air Traffic Management Computer Emergency Response Team have collected as information about the cyber events that aviation faced in 2023. So we will issue our report soon, but this report will be TLP green, so it will be restricted to the aviation community, it won't be public. But to give you some ideas about the aviation cyber threat landscape, keep in mind that the impact of cyber on aviation, the magnitude is billions of euros. It's not a little money that aviation is losing every year due to cyber events affecting aviation worldwide, globally, as a sector. There are some specific patterns which I think are worth being mentioned. For example, we have been reported and insist reported. So there are maybe more events, but at least we're working with what we are detecting as the EATM CERT and what you have kindly accepted to share with us. So we have something like an average of 2 ransomware per week affecting an aviation stakeholder somewhere in the world. And what is interesting is that 65% of them are affecting the supply chain. We have seen also a rise in some specific type of attacks, which are the distributed denial of service, DDoS. And we have seen a rise due to the conflict, first one in Ukraine. So in 2022, we already noticed a significant increase of this kind of attacks, mostly by activists. And this has been confirmed in 2023. So you can see the number, nearly 700 of them. And here, that's interesting also, 70% of them are, at least as reported, affected airports. But we see also basic threats still around, like phishing. This is still ongoing. A lot of you as aviation stakeholders face phishing. Some may develop into ransomware, others maybe into stealing data or whatever. But this is still something that is working. And we'll come back on that because you see, phishing to be effective, you need a human to do something about that. Another important message that also we like to convey is that at least what was reported to us is that no cyber attack affected the safety of flights. And this is something that we have been consistently reported over the last 5 years, because this year will be the 5th edition of our report. So this is just, I would say, to set the scene and to help you to understand a bit where, I would say, the vulnerabilities, where the issues, where the threats are, but also the kind of risk. So yes, there are impact on, as reported, on service provision, on finance, as you have noticed, on reputation, but not so far impact on safety. So to start the discussion, I would like to open the theme with something which is coming directly from this presentation, because for this 2024 report, we will have something like more than 6,700 events. A lot of them are coming from you, so they were shared with us, and thank you very much for that. So I would like to, I would say, kick the first discussion together with Joe, Eric, and Nuno about sharing. So as I said, from 2023 to 2022, we had something like 2.5 times more events which were shared with us. And I think that's a sign of, I'll say, the culture of sharing, which is improving. But I would like to get your views on that. How do you see it, you being on both sides as CISO or CSO of an entity, but also chairing an entity which is supporting part of the community? So starting with Eric, how do you see this, I would say, a culture of sharing? Are we on the right track? Can we do better?
Yeah, good afternoon, Patrick. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'll start with in 2024. As you know, we have the Olympics in France, and strangely enough, the motto is "Stronger Together." And I think this is kind of resuming everything around sharing. And I think you mentioned it was your 5th report, and I think Group ADP has been almost from the very beginning, if not the first one. And I think and I want to kind of publicly acknowledge it here. I think this is the right place. The work you're doing as a EUROCONTROL, and especially you, Patrick, is very important for the community. You started this report, and it made us realize at the time that, of course, we were logging events, incidents sometimes, and also what we were doing, but strangely enough, we were not focusing on kind of summary for the year. And at the end of the year, we said, yeah, it has been a busy year, but what have we done actually? What have been experienced in ADP? So by just asking the question a few years ago, as you mentioned, it helped us organize ourselves around this actually, not just reacting, which is quite common to incident response team, which is also the basics, of course. But more important is to start building a kind of memory of what we were experiencing. So this was the first step for us, actually compiling things and, as you mentioned, sharing. So, which is the second part, as you mentioned. I'm chairing the cybersecurity committee of ICI. I'm also part of the Aviation Isaac initiative. I think these groups are key to raise the level of not so experienced or not so rich actors, actually, meaning how many people you have in your team. So once again, I think we need the most difficult part is to get started. And once again, the report, the data you asked from us help that.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. So Joe, as both CSO and chair of the Aviation Isaac, how do you see this sharing culture? What are the hurdles you are facing? What are the solutions you are finding to improve that sharing culture?
Well, I mean, firstly, it's great to be here. Thanks for asking me along, Patrick. But I think I'd absolutely agree with everything Eric says. If you think about the human body and the way the human body reacts to infection, if I have an infection in my leg, the human body takes care of it. But also, if I see the same infection again in my arm, then we're sharing that information so that my body can generate a whole of system response to that threat and deal with it once. And I think where we are as an aviation system, we are a system of systems, and we hugely rely on each other to deliver the service that our customers rely on. So to not share would mean that we would be bringing huge inefficiency in, but also huge vulnerability and exposure. Now, what I'd suggest is I think there are some issues around information sharing. So some of that's at the kind of the technical aspect, which is understanding what's useful to be shared. And I think in some cases, we're actually seeing that the amount of data that organizations are receiving or sending is so high that some teams are struggling to work out how it is to make best use of the information that's being shared. So I think there's a lot more work we can do to help our organizations establish standards and good practices and automation for helping us with the sharing. But I think also we do have some reluctance and some nervousness in some parts of the community to share, because my sense is that they're not sure how that information is going to be shared. Now, and my view would be that much like the human body, you have a community of trust. My arm trusts my leg to communicate the information it needs to fight an infection. Absolutely, we have to coalesce around communities of trust where we have relationships. We understand that the information we provide is going to be used for good purposes and will be used well, and the rules around how it will be used. And also, honestly, the experiencing the problem and knowing that you were able to deal with it because of information that was shared with you helps as well. I think sometimes we have a bit of a nervousness around sharing, but we've seen just in the last 12 months some really quite well-known organizations suffering some fairly major cyber attacks that can be really quite challenging, and still managing to get the approval and to be able to share really very specific and material threat information to help other organizations to protect themselves. So it's clear it can be overcome. So I think my view is we're doing well, we can do better, and the key enabler is around building the community and the communities of trust.
Thank you, Joe. And you know, on your side, especially from an airline where you have a strong commercial exposition from where the reputation is something important, well, how do you manage this sharing, and especially with your legal department?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Patrick. It's great to be here. Hello, everyone. Well, I think I can echo what Eric and Joe said before. So, and for me, I think on my personal view, since I've joined the airline around 2 years ago, and one of the things I noticed in joining this industry is that the sharing is really powerful, and the communities that have been built and that I've been able to be a part of. And going back to what Eric said about the work that EUROCONTROL is doing, the work that you are doing, Patrick, I think it was great for me to get up to speed to industry challenges more specifically, and that was an enormous added value. And I think going back with what Joe was saying, I can divide things in two different separate topics, I would say. So I think sharing of threat intelligence information. So helping with early warning, I think that's more on the technical side, as Joe mentioned. I think there are platforms that can build the trust around these kinds of sharing that I think are important and are being done. But I think sharing experiences and incidents and what happens, I think it's super valuable. And that's when it connects with the challenge with like the legal department, as you mentioned, because having approval to be able to share more openly the challenges that the organization has faced through a major incident, for example, I think it can be so helpful to other organizations, other stakeholders, that I think we have to do it because it's the way that we're able to protect ourselves going forward. And creating this trust, I think in the end, it goes back also to the personal connections that you build. You need to be part of the industry. You need to be building those relationships, knowing people, gaining their trust so that you are able to share. You can trust the sharings that you're doing and also learn from other people's sharing. And I think that's a real human kind of challenge also.
And I would say to all of you, and a question, which is the experience we have at EUROCONTROL when trying to build a relationship, is that we need trust, so which is usually achieved by a human relationship, but also sometimes we need a kind of a formal level of authorization to share via agreements, and that can take weeks. So what is your experience for you in your own organization? Are you more, I would say, having some kind of freedom to deal with a personal relationship and then building on that? Or do you have always first request, say, put in place some kind of formal agreement, and then after that you will be able to work and to engage? So Eric, your experience on that?
Yeah, of course, formal agreements are necessary, but something we have also to keep in mind that I guess, around the table, we are all part of critical infrastructure, national critical infrastructure. So it goes also with a kind of regulation, depending on the country, but we are not completely at liberty to say anything to anyone. So we have to make sure we respect this kind of hierarchy. And it would be the case for us. Our first reaction would be to National Cybersecurity Center, of course. And going back to the agreement, this is something, but first you need to know or to be sure that you can share outside of your country, let's put it like that, or your authority, outside of your authority, you can share. And I'm sure that everyone here has experienced that. It's very difficult to get back, to get something back from the people you share with. Actually, it's like a black hole very often, unfortunately. So we have to get ready for that. And so this is what we did actually in our case. We have a kind of notice saying that if you don't forbid us, we will share with the aviation community once again. So agreements, but also you have to be sure that you are, I would say, as far as the regulation is concerned, you are at liberty to do it, actually, which is very important on our topics. I'm not talking about commercials like Nuno may have in airlines, but even for critical infrastructure, this is very important, of course.
And Joe, did you kind of face these kind of legal issues, and especially with the Brexit, where somehow UK was not anymore, I would say, fully part of EU. I mean, for Eurocontrol, it's not an issue. Brexit is a non-event, so you are always welcome. So did you face this kind of legal, trust from a more formal point of view? That was a hurdle to sharing information, or no, it's something that you've been able to accommodate and to overcome?
Well, what I'd suggest is that when we're sharing information, we need to differentiate between what's interesting and what's useful. I've been working in cybersecurity for 20-something years, so I find lots of things interesting, but sometimes working out how that's useful is more difficult. I think we always want to know the details, and quite often that translates to understanding impacts. But in many cases, as an example, knowing something about that there's an IP address that's causing damage or harm to part of the sector, and knowing that it comes from a trusted member of the community, that's something I can take and apply to our defensive mechanisms to know if we're receiving attention and to prevent it from escalating. I don't need to know who it's been attacked. I don't need to know what the impact is. I don't need to know anything about the organization, any potential deficiencies they may have had. So what I would suggest is, I think if we can be clear about what is interesting versus what is useful, and focus on what is useful at the crisis point, then I think information sharing doesn't become a particular problem. Clearly, as we build our systems more strategically, and when we look at how we design secure platforms, understanding the interesting case studies is really helpful for us working out how we shift the system as a whole. But from a pure defensive perspective, I just need to know what weapons are out there and are being used. And that's enough for me to make quite a difference to my defensive posture. And that doesn't reveal anything to me about the nature of the organization. So what I'd suggest is, I think by just being clearer around what is needed, we're able to share better at times of need.
Yeah, I fully concur. That's our experience, and you can share what we call indicators of compromise, techniques, and procedures. These are technical. You don't disclose any information related to whether it was affecting your system to whatever extent, what kind of system. So that's something that is useful and can help the others. And for that, there are some tools. And for example, we are promoting the usage of MISP, malware information sharing platform, which is not only allowing to share, I would say, in an effective way, but also in a, I would say, time response, from a time response point of view, that's also effective, because sometimes time matters. You know, the more you're able to update your system with this kind of information, the better protection you offer to your own system. And Nuno, you coming from, I would say, from another sector, have you seen some kind of, I would say, major differences between, say, the capabilities or the intent or the will to share information in aviation versus your experience in other sectors?
Yeah, for sure, Patrick. I think one of the things I mentioned is that I see that in the aviation industry as a whole. I think there's more willingness to share. I think maybe because the industry is smaller than others, and maybe that make it easier to create those personal connections that make it easier to share, but also because of its specificities, and even looking at the ecosystem as a whole and focusing only on airlines, the challenges that airlines are facing is more on the commercial side. For example, on their e-commerce platforms with bot price scrapers, and they're so specific to this industry that the only way, or one of the ways, or one of eventually important ways to mitigate these attacks and these challenges is through the ecosystem, is talking to other airlines. How are they facing this issue? How are they mitigating these issues? What are the strategies? I think, and one of the things I see and you talked about, for example, the legal and sharing and commercial. I think what I see in terms of the aviation industry is that, especially in cybersecurity, I think there's a willingness to share that goes above commercial interests. So I think all airlines, most of them compete between themselves, but I think sharing this common interest of being more protected, having more capabilities to detect, I think it's a common understanding, and the cybersecurity teams, information security teams, I think they're more willing to share, even though it goes, in the end, it could go against commercial interests. But I think industry has to work together, and I see that happening.
Yes, and I'd just like to remind you that, for example, together with Eric, a part of ICAO, we have produced information sharing guidance. So this is something that will be made available to the aviation community with some kind of recommendations on how to do that, how to build your information sharing plan, how to, I would say, mark, you know, the famous traffic light protocol, marking how to mark certain information depending on the nature of information, to whom you want to share it. And also something that is really important for me, that I would say aviation is sometimes, as Joe mentioned, it's suffering a lack of information, but sometimes we have too much information. And what is a bit specific to aviation, that we are used as a way to amplify some propaganda. And what is really important is to conduct some analysis to make sure that the information you provide is subject to this analysis, and you don't take information and push it without verifying. For example, we see a lot of, supposedly attack on website of airports or airlines, and we look at it, it's not the official website of an airport and airline. So the bad guys are just creating some, information to create the buzz and for their personal propaganda, for the propaganda of a group or a theory or a concept or a societal dimension or geopolitical dimension or whatever. So I would say information and intelligence is really depending on analysis. So that's a message I would like to convey, that we need to have the right level of information, otherwise you can be easily overwhelmed with useless information. So the next theme I would like to address with you is related to something that we are really in the middle of it. It's regulations. We have something which is a bit specific, is that now we are facing two threads of, not threats, I said threads, of regulations, which are the aviation-specific one, and I would say the transversal regulations, which are coming, for example, in Europe from the European Commission, the NIS directive, which is affecting all the sectors, or the critical sectors. So we have, I would say, more and more, not only in Europe. I see that thanks to the meeting with at ICAO level, a lot of states now deploying regulations related to cybersecurity or information sharing. And I will start by kind of, I would say, maybe a provocating sentence, which is I organized a workshop on cybersecurity framework in January 2020, and what came out of the financial sector is that a CISO, a Chief Information Security Officer in the financial sector, is spending 40% of his time showing compliance to the multiple regulations. So I will open the debate with you, Nuno. You're in the middle of it. So are we at the risk of going into that direction where we spend our time in trying to show compliance with multiple regulation?
Well, to be honest, Patrick, I think so. I think so because it's a lot to address and to handle. And although I believe it's important, it will create common frameworks in terms of making sure that we're addressing cybersecurity and information security in a good way. Good being obviously a difficult term to define, but it's the intention, I believe. But we're already talking about a highly regulated sector to begin with. Eventually, not specifically in cybersecurity, information security. We are getting there. So I think I see it as an expansion of the regulation that the industry and the sector already has. It will create, I think for me, the worry is it will create a lot of stress and to the cybersecurity and information security teams. That I think that's inevitable. The implementation of the frameworks and the controls and the challenges will depend a lot on the maturity of the organization. Some will be better prepared to address, and others will have a longer journey ahead of them. But in every case, I think once you finish this journey, once you're compliant and you're meeting the regulation, then you have audits that will be almost, I would say, permanent, because if you look at the different regulations, the other regulations that you already had to meet, I think in the end you'll probably need a dedicated team to be able to handle the compliance and the audit requirements that are going to be needed. It's an adjustment, I would say. I don't see easy ways to avoid this or do it in a different way. I think it's just making sure that also the sharing that we talked about in the previous topic is important, because we can learn from each other the ways to more easily address the challenges and how to deploy resources, whether it's money, people, whether it's technology, to make sure that we address this the easiest way and the most compliant way in the end. But I think we're going in the direction of the banking sector, which is more regulated in this area in the past, and I think we're probably going in that direction. I think it's the views on for example on airports and authorities like Joe. I think I don't know. It's try to understand how it could be different, but I think in the end we all have to meet these regulations and adapt to that.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, I would like to have your experience, because in UK, I think something a little bit specific. The UKC has adopted an approach which is, I think, going in the right direction. So can you share with us this experience of how to manage your relationship with your authorities, being cyber or being civil aviation oriented?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be really clear, I think regulation. So regulation is challenging when it gets to the cyber security space, because there are still problems in our industry we're trying to solve, and we don't have, I could say consensus, but I think in some cases we haven't even worked out globally how some of our problems need to be solved. So to look sometimes from a regulatory perspective at trying to get something in place, I do wonder if there's more opportunity to focus attention on international standards and international consensus setting around problems, which can then may well then naturally result in an appropriate regulation. I think where we've seen regulations work well have been in industries where there's a really good understanding and consensus around what good looks like, and a regulation can come in to kind of act in there to shore it up, to deal with anyone who's not living up to it, and to help set some expectations with them. I think there's a lot of regulatory activity that's happened in aviation that's attempted to solve everything in cybersecurity at once. And frankly, for us as practitioners and end user organizations, there are some things where we're kind of going, at some point in the next few years, we'll find out the solution, we'll be able to work out the solutions to some of these problems. But we don't necessarily want to be bedded down into a particular way of doing something, which some of the regulatory practices may result in. So I think we've got quite a good route forward with some of the work that's going on in the UK, looking at some of the outcomes. So to what extent do you have a defensible organization. But like I say, throughout all of that, how, with the best will in the world, we still get into specific technologies and specific solutions. I think, if you think to it from a certain extent, is you could take a regulation and look at it from an outcomes perspective, which is that if the regulation is successful in preventing the outcome, then the regulation is successful. I think there is a challenge, which is that we don't have many high impact security scenarios within aviation. So we have to ask ourselves, why is that? What is it that's helping us to do that? Well, some of that is attack surface. Some of that is because we already have organizations with strong safety cultures that percolate into control, management, rigor, and those sorts of things. So I do wonder if there is going to be a challenge to regulation in the future around providing some areas where we kind of lock down what needs to be done, where it's really well understood and established, and other areas give the sector some flexibility to grow and develop. And I think one of the topics we'll talk about later is supply chain, which I think is a really good example where actually we all do supply chain security stuff, but no one's satisfied with how we do it. And the danger would be for a regulation to lock that current practice in when actually we know we could do so much better.
Yeah, yes, and that's something we will address after, indeed, because there are also some changes ahead of us with new technologies, with system more open. So that's one of the things we need to think about. And you, Eric, because in France also you are facing these issues of having multiple regulations. So how do you, as a CISO of an airport, do you reconcile all that? How much the authorities are helping you to propose you a framework that can make your life easier and not having a proliferation of demonstrations to be provided?
Yeah, exactly. I start with maybe a strange declaration, which is I love regulations, actually. Especially in France, it helped me to be where I am, actually. And with the number of people and the money I have, it comes from regulation. And going back to what Nuno said, I'm lucky also being in an airport, and I guess it's the same for airlines and ANSP. We are used to be regulated for safety and security, which means that it's already part of the DNA of the company. And my job, to go back to your question, my job as a CISO is not to take it all for me. On the contrary, I'm here to serve the people dealing with security, with safety in ADP. So instead of saying I have to incorporate all these regulations, I said, okay, let's put it like that, a CISO, technical guy, maybe, and I will just go there and explain the regulation, the specifics of cybersecurity regulation we have in aviation, and don't try to do the job for them, actually. Once again, we need to be compliant for safety and for security. Cybersecurity is only one mean to attack or to diminish the quality of safety or quality of security we have in airports, for instance. So I think this is exactly the other way around. We should not be starting by saying this is cyber and help me do it. It's the exact opposite. You want to achieve something in safety, so we have the EASA regulation coming on very soon. And we started already this trajectory with our safety teams. What are your critical processes? And on these processes, what are your critical IT systems or OT systems? And then, as cybersecurity expert, my team and I, we go there and explain and help them to be better cyber secure. And the ultimate goal is to reach compliance for safety. Cybersecurity is embedded. And going back to the second part of your question, yeah, we are lucky also in France because we have a very clever CAA who has the same issue as we have, actually. You mentioned overlapping regulation. This is an issue. I've been, and I guess you have been the witness of my fight on the European scene. That will be the stupid and technical difficulty. We'll have to comply to a topic on one way for EASA, for instance, and on another way for DG Move, to put it like that. And this is a waste of time. So what France Civil Aviation has been doing is try to create, or actually they achieve it, they created a text, French, I won't say alternative means of compliance, because this is not exactly what they intend to do, but a kind of overarching text addressing all the compliance issue we may have in aviation, in airports especially, meaning safety, sorry to repeat myself, but safety, security, and of course, efficiency of the airport, which goes without saying. We don't, I guess everybody around the table or in the audience doesn't need a regulation to make sure its company is reliable. But I think these French initiatives are spread across Europe, in different countries. But I think this is the way forward, actually. Try to make cybersecurity teams serving the ultimate goal of the company, meaning, once again, safety and security for airports, for instance.
Yes, I think you pinpointed something that is important, that regulation is not only negative. I mean, we can see it from a safety point of view. The success of aviation is a regulated industry, and when the regulation is becoming loose or the demonstration is becoming loose, then there are, I'll say, complacencies in some areas, and then we can see the consequences. So I was a bit provocating by pinpointing some negative aspect, but as you mentioned, it first is forcing senior management to react, because somehow there is no choice. You have to be compliant, so you need to put some money, some energy, some resources. And this is leading to the next theme, which is related to the human resources. And I think that one of the messages I would like that the audience get out of today is that cyber is not only the issue of Eric, Joe, and Nuno, and these three persons are the one doing everything in the company, and for us, it's a done deal. So we need some resources. We need some staff, not only in the cyber team, but also within the operating team, within the development team, within, I would say, even the level of the controllers, the pilot, the ATEP, the MRO staff, and whatever. So everybody needs to be, I would say, aware. And one of the issues we face is this issue of resources, finding, I would say, cyber expertise that we can hire. Guys will not decide to go to the banks because somehow they offer attractive, I would say, salaries, and they hire a lot of people. So how do you manage this challenge of staffing your company with cyber expertise, and again, not only in your cyber team, but within the company, because a lot of evidence from a cybersecurity or information security point of view are coming from the project, from the operations, not only from the cyber cell, the cyber team. So, Eric, on your side, what is your experience? And I know that you have some views on not only recruiting, but also keeping the resources.
Yeah, well, I start with, once again, an obvious statement is, if you want to hire people, you need to be attractive. So first, think about that. I don't know for airlines, I don't know for other companies, but this is the way we as CISO, we need to think. And not saying we are an airport or we are the aviation and people will rush to work for us. And I think right now, once again, this is obvious. Salaries are on the rise, so it's getting more and more difficult to get experienced people at the right cost, which is maybe almost impossible. We have to find other ways to attract people. Money is, of course, necessary, like in every company, but we need also to think about attractivity. Attractivity, once again, aviation is attractive, but right now or was attractive as a technology, but now with environmental crisis, aviation is no longer really. It would be better to work in sustainability than in aviation right now for young people. So we need to think about that, even if other parts of the company are doing their job on sustainability. We need to make sure we give good challenges to young people to get them to aviation first and to cybersecurity second. So one thing we are experiencing right now or putting in place right now in ADP is saying first, you won't be working in the same team for your whole life or your professional life in ADP, which was maybe the case a few years back. Actually, you were in IT, you were in OT, you were in airport operations, and that was it for the rest of your career in ADP. So now we have done here a kind of sorry, I miss the English word. We have something like that. We are, let's put it like that, a big IT family, and you can one day work in cybersecurity, and in 2 years maybe you will go back to operations or to OT, to BHS, to whatever. So I think this is very important to first to give to these people a kind of career path, even if it's short one. Make sure they won't stay in cybersecurity if they don't want to. Second thing I wanted to say is maybe sometimes it's easier to train people on cybersecurity than to train people on cybersecurity people on airports. So same thing, go and find in your company some guys who are, or men or women, who want to work in cyber and train them, teach them. Same thing in ADP, we have created a kind of internal course, I would say. You're good in airport, we will teach you the basics in cybersecurity if you want to join us. And same thing, and I will close on this for already too long. And the point you mentioned at the end of the question, how to keep resources. This is kind of related to what I said. Okay, you're happy because you recruited someone, but as a CISO, I can't sleep on that. I have to think kind of 2 years in advance or 3 years in advance and say, what's the next step? Even with my team, even with the team in ADP. So I think this is very important because in 2 years' time, the people you hired will be very skilled. So on the market, they will have a big value, and how you manage to keep up with that in 2 years or 3 years' time.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's important to have a vision indeed. It's not only recruiting, it's and making sure that they will remain with you. And you, Joe, on your side, how do you address this staffing challenge, and especially from a diversity point of view? Because, we know that aviation is quite a macho environment already. Cyber is a macho environment. So cyber in aviation is a macho square environment. So how do you address this challenge of having some kind of, I would say not 50-50, but better balance, a better representation of in your cyber team at NATS?
Well, I think firstly, Patrick, at some point we'll have to have a discussion around what the word macho means, because I think aviation is very male dominated. And I think that's clearly a challenge. If you look just at cyber security and you look at the, cyber is about connecting technology to people. By that very definition, the diversity of the problems we're trying to solve, from technical system design and system maintenance through to articulating risk, through to human factors, that we talk about the human firewall, communications and engagement. We have a diversity of problems that we have to solve. We therefore need a diversity of thinking and contribution. And in order to maintain that, we have to have inclusion in our industry for everyone to feel that they are valued as part of that team. So I think all of those things remain true, and we have a challenge in our industry in a number of aspects around diversity that we have to address. Now, some of that is a legacy of aviation being, frankly, quite male dominated. But we then have to make sure that we're doing something around that. So I think, within NATS, we've got a really effective early careers program. So we're looking to bring people through industrial placement, so sandwich years. At university, we have a graduate program. We've done some work on apprenticeships. We'll do the same again, and using those as opportunities to bring people at the beginning of their careers in. What I'd suggest, though, is even if you look at university, we still find some massive gender bias in some of the technical disciplines. So some of it goes earlier than that. And we've been supporting the UK's National Cybersecurity Centre on the Cyber First Girls Challenge, which is a programme targeted at 14-year-old schoolgirls, and getting them interested and engaged in cybersecurity through setting challenges. And I would say, from having hosted some of those events, the energy in the room is addictive. And what we want to do is bring that energy and enthusiasm into our own teams to refresh, to enthuse us, and to provide us with energy. So I think there are absolutely things we can do. I think there is a risk, and the challenge we have, which isn't unique to aviation, is that we're quite often looking for mid-level to senior cybersecurity roles on the market. And I think the question is how many people are we training to achieve mid-level to senior cybersecurity roles? If that's what we want, we should have been developing them 10 to 15 years ago. So my view is that I will train and develop people. if they stay with us, that's fantastic. If they go elsewhere, then they're creating another body in the market that then potentially creates an opportunity for someone else to join me. So I think to expect people to stick around in an organization, especially nowadays when jobs are much more sort of temporal, I think is difficult. But we do have to be clear that aviation is a really interesting industry. When we talk to cybersecurity, we've got interesting things on the edge of that end of that digital connection. We've got aircraft, we've got baggage systems and security systems, airports, avionics systems, radars and radios. It's a great place to be from a cybersecurity perspective. And I know you used the example of something like the finance sector, but I don't see as much enthusiasm and excitement in some industries as I do in others. And I'd suggest aviation is a really exciting industry to be in.
Yeah, I concur. I think I agree with you that personally at the age of 9, it was decided I wanted to be an engineer in aviation. But this is something, when you see an aircraft flying, it's much more, I would say, it creates a passion more than thinking about a banking system. But that's I think it's an important message we need to convey also. I see that, for example, the guys in my team that are doing pen tests, when they do pen tests on aviation system, yes, that's obviously much more attracting than doing that on accounting system, definitely. And on your side, do you have also, I would say, a kind of issue with resources which are from the company versus contractors? How do you manage all that? How do you find a way to get the right resources at the right time, at the right price?
Well, it's a big challenge, Patrick. I think for me, being in cybersecurity for more than 20 years now, I think attracting and retaining challenge, I think it's been the biggest one for me, I think, in my career, to be honest. And as Joe was mentioning, I think we should have started investing more than a decade ago or 2 decades ago, and I think we're not ready now. And specifically for TAP, I think the challenge is even bigger because it's a company that's coming out of COVID, obviously in the restructuring plan. It has its own challenges in terms of kind of turning around. And so that obviously makes it, I would say, less attractive in the first instance. And also it's more difficult for us to compete in the market that's getting, like Eric mentioned, it's more and more expensive. And thinking about COVID, it actually created ways for people to start working abroad and staying in their own places, and it creates an even bigger challenge. And so I think for us, to grow our capabilities, it is a lot based on service providers. I think it's the way to go, and it connects with something that we're going to approach further ahead, which is the supply chain. So there's no way around it. It increases the risk, and to manage it becomes more and more difficult. But what we're doing specifically is investing in trainees. So in like Joe was mentioning, like, we need to bring people that need to be trained, training them, try to retain them as much as possible, make them part of a family, of a project that's growing, that's developing, make it attractive so that they stay and are able to obviously contribute to the strategy that we have. It's not easy. I think that the new generations, I think they approach work in different ways than eventually we did. We're probably all the same age, and I think attracting them, sometimes it's in different ways. And what I've been seeing is, and I can give you a funny example of just interviewing a trainee the other day, and we're always looking for passion in aviation and in the industry. And I asked them, why are you applying for TAP? Do you have an interest in aviation? Do you like airplanes? Do you like flying? And his reply was so honest that I was just almost blown away. And he said, I live nearby and I can walk to the office. And it's like, well, it's what it is, and it's a perfectly valid reason. And maybe it's the way to attract someone that wants to walk to the office and lives nearby. And I don't know, it's a big challenge. And we need to invest in training. We need to invest. I think diversity is also a very interesting topic. And you mentioned, for example, pen testing. I think having a diverse team that is able to think in different ways, it's really important for the work that a pen testing specialist is doing, an ethical hacker. And so this diversity will contribute to improve the capabilities that we have. It's not easy, but I think it's part of the journey. And for me, thinking, there's such a big lack of resources that thinking about diversity, I think we're not there yet. I think we're just trying to make sure that we have the resources, and if it's diverse, the better. But we really need the resources in the first place. So we'll need to do that journey together and see what we can achieve.
Yes, that's definitely a challenge for aviation. This staffing, and especially I would say at a time where the new generation, I would say, a relationship with the company is very different from the one we have. So that's also something that we, the one recruiting, need to consider at the time of recruiting another generation. So how to attract them? What are the messages we can convey to attract them? And as your example is very nice, because we may think a certain way and they may be looking for something else. So that's not easy. I've got two daughters, 30 and 28. So I see what you mean. So I would like to go to the next theme, which is really something that is, I would say, at the heart of the challenges from cybersecurity from an operational point of view, from I would say new system development, or the future of aviation with the future challenges or the threats with AI, with the cloud and whatever, is the supply chain. So aviation is very, very much dependent on the aviation chain, and I think that our aviation supply chain is a little bit unique in the way that it's quite wide. We have things going from catering to de-icing, fueling, aircraft, radars, depending on energy, on telecom, on GNSS. And at the same time, sometimes the supply chain is super narrow. We have one or two providers for one specific component, and that's it. And so at the beginning, I mentioned that there are on average 2 ransomware, and most of them, 65%, are affecting the supply chain. So we are facing this challenge, and well, I know that some initiatives are ongoing, and I would like to I would say have your views on that. How do you think we can do that? So starting with you, Joe, on your NAT hat, and with your Aviation Isaac hat also at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit how you see how to address this main challenge in aviation?
Yeah, well, I'd say so. I get quite I'm trying to think of the right term, enthused when we talk about supply chain, and the reason for that is I think it's probably the biggest unsolved problem we have in cybersecurity, whether that's in aviation or any other sector, or any other part of the use of technology. I don't think we found a good way to do it yet. If we think about the way that our businesses engage with our supply chain, we quite often talk about trying to get a black box. We want to buy a service, we want to buy a product that performs in a certain way, and our businesses provide a specification, go to the market, buy the thing, and then typically the security person turns up and says, "I need to have a look inside the black box now, and I need you to fill in a 500-line spreadsheet around what's inside the black box." And when we see a major organization somewhere in the world suffer from a cybersecurity incident because someone wasn't wearing a green hat, we all suddenly put sort of wearing a green hat onto our spreadsheet, and it becomes line 501, because we're all worried that if there's a security breach and we didn't check that our supplier was wearing a green hat, then we'll have a problem. So at the moment, my sense is we're not doing anything efficiently, and we're not doing anything effectively, because wearing a green hat or not isn't going to make a huge difference to cybersecurity. So there's some work we need to do to shift the liability. We need to be much clearer with our suppliers around what is required. And I do think our supply chain needs to step up to be more open and honest and transparent around what they're doing and what they're not doing. We do have a challenge around agility. So whatever we put into a contract, and in aviation, because of the nature of some of the technologies we use, some of our contracts are quite long. We do need to be able to leverage in agility to changing cyber threats within a contract term, and that's tough. There are some initiatives that are starting to crack this, or starting to have a go. So within the Aviation Isaac, we're working with Boost Aerospace on the Air Cyber Initiative, and that's starting to look at, can we agree a common questionnaire, and can we agree a single time of someone opening the black box rather than everyone going in and checking that black box. And I guess that's getting much closer to something like automotive safety. Now, if I buy a car, I don't go to the Ford factory and insist on seeing their design documents and inspecting the plant. I receive the car and I realize there are some maintenance activity I need to do. So I need to update the oil, make sure the tires are inflated and have tread. So I understand what I have to do, but trying to go and work out if the braking system was designed to run on the UK roads, that's not something I do. I rely on a standard. The car's manufactured to a standard. So my sense is we need more standards to help us to agree as an industry, this is what we want to buy, this is what we want to build, this is how it operates. And we need to look at, again, more community work, which is how do we coalesce around a set of standards and standard practices that we agree on without sort of lining up in a queue to go and visit each other's data centers and fill in yet another spreadsheet. Because I think that all of those 500-line spreadsheets all have 500 different lines to each other. So there are some things that are starting to address this, but I think we've got a lot further to go. And I think, frankly, there will be some aspects of it that will require legislation and some changes. And I think we've just seen some examples of this in the UK with Internet of Things. So we've seen obligations coming out where manufacturers of home technology aren't allowed to provide standard default passwords. They have to state very clearly how long the system will be patched for and when security patches will stop. So that's starting to put the right information into the right hands and allow consumers to make choices. So a lot more to do here. And I like I say, I think it's the biggest unsolved problem in cybersecurity at the moment.
Yeah, very, very interesting, and especially with these kind of pragmatic approaches to promote standard and to have a rationalization of all these demonstration with the Boost Aerospace initiative. And you, Eric, I know that you have been working on that, and especially for security equipment. Can you share your experience? Because I think you have done something quite unique, and that is showing the way for the industry.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm showing the way, thanks, Patrick, but yeah, I can talk a bit about that. And going back to the topic we had before, I think it would be interesting to make a survey how many security updates we get from our supplier, actually, in comparison to classical IT providers like Microsoft, etc. I'm pretty sure that information sharing with this supplier is almost to a minimum. We never get some updates, even if, as Joe mentioned, it's very difficult sometimes to patch, but I think newer generation are quite easy computers to patch, actually. And that's very disappointing. So yeah, at ACI Europe, we tried to start something, an initiative with in collaboration with EOS, which is the kind of syndicate of screening equipment manufacturers, to first define standards. So we started just before COVID. So unfortunately, it somehow got to a halt, and so we have a list of requirements, but it's only a sheet of paper, unfortunately, so far. So what we did in ADP, we decided to go maybe a bit further and do actual pen testing. I know that, Patrick, this is something you like too. Your teams are very keen on having hands-on experience on this, and this is the same for ADP. And so we had, instead of doing this contractually, which is something I don't like, because for me, cybersecurity should be in the mind of everybody. That Joe mentioned, and he's right, putting this in the requirements. But I think, like the car example, these manufacturers, they should do it by default, by design. They can't rely on us to make sure we have the exact cybersecurity requirement for them to deploy. They know their black boxes, as mentioned by Joe, so they should be the one securing it, actually. But anyway, what we decided to test in ADP 2 years ago, and we're still on this track because it takes time, we decided to basically do pen tests on this and give the hackers direct access to the machine. So of course I can't disclose anything there, and but as you can imagine, it was not 100% perfect. Maybe just below it. Let's put it like that. Kind of understatement, but whatever. And actually, it was very interesting. What was the most interesting, actually, was not the technical results themselves, but the way some manufacturers accepted to collaborate on this, actually. And they were also learning, of course. I would have preferred them learning by themselves, but whatever. For some of these companies and people, it was kind of enlightenment, saying, "Oh, this is not only feasible; this is actually happening in our systems." And the tricky part there is to walk the fine line between contract. People say you don't have to, you can't do this, or you will have to pay more for this because that's not part of the contract, and collaboration, saying we are all in this together. And maybe one day, and that's the way, that's the goal I try to achieve, pen test will be part of our tenders, saying if you can't reach 100% of this test in our tender, you're out. And of course, we are not there yet, but we are getting closer and closer. You may have witnessed this also, or your teams, Patrick, have witnessed this. And so this is my message for any supplier there. I would encourage them to get ahead of ADP instead of being behind, because once the day they are behind, they're out of the tenders.
Yes, and I agree with you, and that's where also maybe regulation can play a part. Typically, we have some question whether there are some regulation. Part IS applies to the supply chain, so they are not excluded. But the issue is the depth of the supply chain, but also, and maybe you have experience on that, is it's safety sometimes versus security or cybersecurity. It's IT versus OT. So how do you reconcile all that? Because for the supply chain, cyber is not a specific product. You have a product which has to reconcile being safety compliant, cybersecurity compliant, quality, blah blah blah, and financially attractive also.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile all that?
I think, to be honest, I think it goes back a little bit what Joe was saying before. I think you need those standards, those frameworks that will give you the trust that you need on certain products and services. I think if you look at, for example, DORA, that's much focused on the financial sector, I think something similar could a little bit set the stage and help in the aviation industry also, especially on the providers of IT services, IT technologies. I think could be interesting. There's a lot of other things being developed in terms of the product of the cybersecurity of products, for example. Because in the end, I think it's really an ecosystem that needs to be created, and the level that you're looking for in terms of security and privacy by design, as Eric was mentioning, needs to be on par to what the requirements are for the organization, and that's really not easy. And I honestly believe it goes back to the partners, also to the suppliers. I think that they should be eventually the first to say that they won't be able to provide you products or services if you yourself don't meet certain controls or certain levels of maturity that they will be able to provide those services in a good way. So I think that's also a challenge. That's why I see it as a community or ecosystem as a whole. And for me, the issue is, if we're going to develop third-party risk management programs in each organization, and going back to contract management, to risk management, to questionnaires and all that, and every organization in the industry is going to do that, and is going to do that for mostly some of the same partners and suppliers. If you imagine the amount of time, resources, money that's going to be spent for every organization doing this, it's incredible. And I think we as industry and as a community need to come together. That's why initiatives like Air Cyber, for example, could help in creating the standards, the frameworks to make sure that we're all at the same kind of level that we want to be. Certifications, for example, I don't know, it's not easy to create common standards. And for example, national in Portugal, there's the initiative to create some kind of cybersecurity seals or something that create kind of common level of security, but it's difficult to have everyone on board and everyone agree that those standards are the ones that make sense. And so sometimes in the end, we'll probably need to make a compromise. And then as long as we work together as an industry and try to improve this level, there's a lot of savings, I would say, in all areas that could be achieved by doing that.
Yes, and I think that also aviation together with other sectors are sometimes to team up to force certain technologies, certain also services to be at the right level, so that by default somehow you have this level instead of each trying to, you know, on its own convince its supplier to provide a system that is acceptable. Because again, we are using some systems which are aviation specific, but on the other end, we're using some systems or some services which are used by many other sectors of industry. So I think supply chain is definitely something that is, as Gio said at the beginning, we need to find solutions. We are not yet there, and that is a challenge that also has a cost, and that is something that is not easy, because when you have to convince some decision makers that you need to pay 15% more for that because that product is more cyber secure, well, some are maybe challenging, and that's where sometimes regulation can help. And the culture, I think, trust more in the culture so that everybody understands that it's not saving money, it's investing. Because as Eric said at the beginning, being a victim of cyber attack will cost much more than what we can invest in protecting in our system. So it's time to address the questions. We have received some questions before, and I see some questions which are put in the Q&A, and thank you very much for that. We have a set of questions which are around something which is super important, it's the human element. We said at the beginning that, well, without the human, the system not only don't work, but also maybe I would say the capability of the cyber threat actors is facilitated, because especially if you promise money or whatever, the human tends to lose his brain. So Joe, especially on the operational side, from a technical side, like at CEP or controllers, whatever, what is the approach you have to support them performing their task in a new world, which includes cybersecurity?
Well, so I think the first thing is this is absolutely a relevant topic. So I think, as I think I've mentioned, cyber is really about how digital platforms and people come together. And much as in many cases, cyber is a buzzword and used instead of information security, in aviation, this absolutely is around connecting people and technology. However, I do think we have a problem. Every one of us has a personal budget for security. And whether that's accessing our bank account, logging into a social media site, logging into our corporate systems, we do have a challenge, which is how do we maintain that all within everyone's human security budget? Now, for those of us in cybersecurity, we may have more budget than others because it's something we engage in and we understand and we spend a lot of time on. If I think of some people, like my 11-year-old daughter, her interaction with technology is much more limited, and she hasn't had the inexperience, the bad experiences, but also her ability to understand the technology and the issues around that is hugely limited. Now, we do have some advantages in aviation, which is that we understand human factors very well. So there is a lot we need to do to look at how can we bring the security practices that we need our people to carry out within their own budget, within their own security budget. In some cases, I think that's quite practical. And if we think of air traffic controllers, our air traffic controllers are trained to deal with unusual circumstances. We have programs to train and run through the procedures that we would need. And those sorts of things can be managed. I think in some cases where we have much more complex scenarios, or we put complicated rules onto all our members of staff, where you have to wear a green hat on a Wednesday and jump through a hoop and do X, Y, and Z in order to be able to access your corporate email, that really is pushing the human security budget very far. So there's a lot we're doing, which is looking at how do we sew security into the work that goes on a day-to-day basis. How does it become intuitive and natural as part of the job that's being done? but I'd suggest that there's going to be a lot more that we have to do. And I don't think it's just an aviation problem. I think it's a general society problem. We all have to be digital natives, but it's not something that comes naturally to us. I can see if I leave my front door open. I can't necessarily see if I haven't sufficiently configured a Microsoft Windows server. That's much less intuitive. So much more to do.
Yes, definitely. I think one of the issues also we face is generally, I would say, the technologies are deployed and tools are deployed without the education package and that goes with it, because it comes with a cost, and sometimes the commercial pressure is to deploy, and that's something that we see quite often, especially, for example, which was interesting at the time of the COVID. There we had nearly no choice. The only way to survive was to allow remote access. So that was, you do that or you die. So sometimes you don't really have the time to do the way you wanted. We're discussing about the supply chain, about the resources, and there is something which is quite interesting, which is so-called bug bounty, and that's a way maybe to benefit from other resources which are not part of your, I would say, initial ecosystem. So Eric, maybe can you share your experience of bug bounty and maybe explaining it to those who are not familiar with this approach?
Yeah, bug bounty is kind of crowdsourced pen testing, kind of. I don't know if it's clearer than bug bounty itself, but it means that instead of paying people to pen test your system for a certain amount of days, you said, my systems are open to everybody, so feel free to kind of attack them, let's put it like that. And if you find something interesting or critical, you get rewarded, paid for this. Of course, this is not kind of a jungle. We go through what we call platforms, meaning that we have a middleman in it whose main job, apart from technical platform itself for declaring reports, etc., their main job is really to vet these white hats, meaning that you're not having people testing your system and keeping or not supposed to keep what they found for themselves. Part of it is to give it to the company like ADP. So really, for me, this kind of work is a no-brainer today. You need to have this, depending, of course, of your attack surface. But I'm pretty sure everybody has something which is 24/7 available on the internet in an airport, for instance, without proper surveillance. Even if we have cameras, etc., you still have people that can try to tamper with checking desk or kiosk or whatever. So we need to be kind of in advance to these people and open this to anyone, but in a controlled manner. And for instance, in ADP, we have specific bug bounty programs depending on specific targets, but also we have what we call the vulnerability disclosure program, meaning that if anyone finds something, he can declare it to ADP and get rewarded for that. We have only this for IT systems so far, but I know some of my colleagues in French railways do that also for physical things. You go to a station and you find something unusual. It could maybe not IT, it could be, I don't know, this door is not secured, or I don't know, this is dangerous or whatever. So they have the same thing, the same kind of program. And once again, this is not replacing pen test. This is not replacing security by design, of course. But kind of to summarize it, you have 24/7 attacks. So you need to have 24/7 surveillance on your side. And bug bounty is a good way to do it.
So we're reaching the end of this webinar. So to conclude, I would like to ask you in 30 seconds, what is your main message? What are the takeaways you want the audience to leave? And then we'll start with you, Nuno.
Well, I will probably pick up on one of the last topics that we were just mentioning about the human being. So I think with everything that we have to develop in all different areas, I would say, I think the human will still be the weakest link. I think there are statistics that say that 80% of breaches are a direct result of human error, for example. Whether it's someone that clicks on a phishing email, or whether it's someone that should have put a patch in the system and didn't do it. And so in the end, mostly goes back to ourselves as the weakest link. And I think general awareness, it's really important to keep investing on for the newer generations also. I think with the challenges of generational AI and misinformation, false information, all of that will keep increasing the difficulty for us in understanding what is safe and what it isn't. And this journey, we've done it in physical security, I would say, a long time ago. We need to do it on the cyber, or keep doing it on the cyber side also.
Okay, thank you, Nuno. Joe, 30 seconds.
So I would say that I think just as we might see the human as a challenge, I think also the human body gives us an opportunity and is our future. You know, human body has many parts that have to work together to protect the system of systems. And as humans, we work with each other to protect our societies and our cultures and our communities. So I'd say as an industry, we have to continue to build the communities that protect the bodies, the parts of the aviation system. We have some excellent communities already. And it's not an exclusive club. There are plenty of opportunities for more communities to grow and develop. But also, we do need to be more inclusive within those communities, both from the perspective of our people, so diverse thinking and contribution, but also in our industry. So making sure we bring our suppliers, our customers, and our stakeholders into those communities as well to make the system more resilient.
Thank you, Joe. Eric?
I make it 5 seconds, actually. If you think cybersecurity is expensive, lack of cybersecurity is even more expensive. So let's do it.
Definitely. Yeah, I fully concur. So I want to thank you very much. It has been really a pleasure facilitating, moderating this panel together with you, Eric, Joe, and Nuno. Thank you again for all those who attended and who asked some questions. We have tried to address them also during the webinar itself, not specifically at the end. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it opened your eyes on what are the challenges that we have to tackle from a cyber point of view in aviation. And stay tuned. There will be some more webinars that will come soon. So EUROCONTROL is keeping organizing these webinars for your pleasure, for your awareness, and I hope for providing an added value to the aviation community. So thank you very much again. Thank you, Joe, Eric, and Nuno. It was really a pleasure. Thank you all those who organized this webinar behind the curtains. And have good rest of the day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.